Hello, everybody. Welcome to Debra and Peter are doing a podcast with me, Deborah Alcott-Tyler, and my lovely friend, Peter Wanless. How are you, Peter? How's your week been?
Hi, Deborah. I'm fine, thank you. Somerset had an incredible win on Saturday night, which was on Sky TV, and so it kind of broke through to a few of my friends, and it was one of these games where we were not going to win at all until the last over, and I was hosting 11 people from Warwickshire. Well, they call themselves the Bears, and they were rather full of themselves because they just knew that they were going to win this game, and then in the last minute they didn't. And so I was probably not at my most diplomatic best in the way in which I celebrated. So we are now off to Birmingham on Saturday for finals day to have a great big party at their ground. It's a party to which they are now not invited. And in fact, this exact same thing has happened to that team the last 5 years in a row. They've got to the quarterfinal, they've lost. So I'm very sorry for them. So that's one thing that has happened.
That does make me laugh, though, doesn't it? Because that's one thing about cricket that people don't understand. I mean, OK, this is, short form cricket, but nonetheless, how it could literally change in the space of, a few balls, a couple of wickets and the odd six. It's just phenomenal. I think people don't realise how exciting cricket can be. I try and convince people, they was like, yeah, all right, Deborah, you carry on saying that.
If you were going to go to one game or watch one game, and I'm okay, I am completely obsessed with Somerset. But the next day, Sunday, it was a bit rainy. I watched the whole game back again.
Did you? Yeah.
It was just as good second time round, and I had goosebumps because I still wasn't sure we were going to win, even on the replay. So that was good. And then I was asked last night to go up to London. Would I speak as a last-minute substitute on a panel for an event for a South African charity which brings sport into the homelands around Cape Town, and it's run by a famous, if you know your cricket, fast bowler called Vince van der Bijl, who played for Middlesex for one season in 1980. But he was one of these players whose career was completely ruined by the apartheid ban on South Africa in competitive sport, organised by now Lord Peter Hain, who was in the audience last night. So that was interesting. So a great little charity, and a professor of development economics, I think it was, who was originally supposed to be the extra member on this panel, had dropped out. And they thought, oh, well, Peter knows a bit about charity and he likes cricket. Perhaps he could. So for a friend, I said, yeah, I'll appear at this, little realising that the other member of the panel was Mike Brearley, probably the wisest, cleverest, most famous England cricket captain down the ages, who was the great kind of leader of Ian Botham and back in the day, and is now a very esteemed psychoanalyst, and has written the book on cricket captaincy. Well, actually, it's on captaincy.
I'd love to read it.
It's what is it called? Spirit cricket. We'll put it in the we'll put a link in the notes. But it's a very famous cricket book. But it's all about leadership, not so much about cricket. So if that wasn't intimidating enough, then we were all being interviewed by Mike Atherton, who is probably the other extremely clever, highly eminent captain of England, now the Times cricket correspondent, brilliant broadcaster and superb writer. So I thought, I'm going to have to be on top of my game
on
here.
Your game.
But it was okay, and it was a lovely event, trying to raise awareness and understanding of what this South African charity of Vince van der Bijl's was doing. And we just talked about the power of sport and engagement of young people, and I talked about the principles of how you engage and involve young people and how you meet them where they are, which isn't talking and thinking about cricket and sport all the time. And lots of people are thinking about this at the moment because Freddie Flintoff's programme Field of Dreams has just started again.
Yeah.
So there's a sort of third series of that, which again is, I mean, yes, it's about cricket, but it's not really. It's kind of about youth work, isn't it?
Yeah,
and
it is.
It illustrates the power of engagement and involvement of and with young people, and how brilliant youth workers can motivate and engage young people in teams to find some purpose in their lives. So that was great. So I zoomed up to London yesterday afternoon, did this event, and was back again here this morning.
Oh, do you know, I love Freddie Flintoff's Field of Dreams, and listeners, if anyone's listening, you don't have to love cricket to really appreciate the value of that program, because as Peter says, it's about young people. It's about meeting young people where they are. It's about setting parameters of behavior, but not judging. You know, these are the rules, but we're not going to judge you for. Yeah, I just think it's wonderful, actually, very human and very real and very inspiring. But it's so interesting also that charities get into every walk of life. I think the general public do not understand how probably not a day goes by where some way or another they're not benefiting from the work of the charity. I mean, even just breathing the air, you know, would have been the work of the British Lung Foundation campaigning for decades about cleaning up air and stuff like that. And I think it's a pity because, you know, charities are seen so much as a nice to, of really sweet, isn't it, rather lovely? And actually we deal with some of the grittiest, toughest, most intractable challenges in society and environments and things like that, and do it well.
Against impossible odds. Yeah. I mean, there's this extraordinary statistic. I mean, we all think of South Africa as an incredible force in world sport, and they've won, I think, 4 Rugby World Cups. They're the current cricket Test champions. I mean, they're brilliant at sport. Only 6% of schools play sport as part of their curriculum, but then only, I think, 7% of the population are white. Yeah. So there are structural problems in that country, which you can just sit back and say, well, what the hell are the government doing about all of this? And how does this measure up to what Mandela's vision of sport as a great unifier could be? But in the meantime, there are people like Vince and his charity, you know, battling away and engaging, involving, especially girls. It was good. It's a wholesome and exciting and interesting thing to do, and some of the cricket great and the good were out in force, and I had a chance to advertise a few bits and pieces which Somerset Cricket Foundation are doing across the West Country.
Did you mention the podcast, Peter?
Oh yeah, now that,
shame on you.
I know. I've got to, we need to promote the podcast wherever we can. But
what an opportunity missed.
Yes. Perhaps we could get Mike Brearley on as a guest at some point. I'm not sure. He's my new friend. He signed a book for me, because I have got his. This isn't the captaincy book.
Yeah.
I'm mentioning, but it's a newer one that he's written. Hey, I think he's brilliant. And there we are. And then my other slightly cricket-related development, but not really about cricket, is I can't remember if I'd mentioned to you that one of the many things that this house has is a flagpole.
Yes.
I think we must be the only podcast that hasn't talked about flags and flying flags. And I saw Billy Bragg interviewed on Newsnight, and his line was, if you've got a flagpole, fly a flag. So there's a question for us. We arrived, and the flagpole was flying a rather tatty Union Jack, which I didn't particularly have a problem with, but another member of the family did have a problem with, because of what other people might assume we meant by flying the Union Jack, which is a bit of a shame. Anyway, at the cricket ground, I've met someone who runs a community interest company called Passion for Somerset, and they are behind Somerset Day, which is a day when everyone kind of comes together and seeks to celebrate the county. It's based on Yorkshire Day, and they had a competition to design a flag for Somerset, and he has given me a Somerset flag. So when we won a game recently, we hoisted the flag, and I saluted it, and we now have a Somerset flag flying over our house. So I am with the people who want to fly flags up to a point, But yeah, what are your thoughts and feelings about flags and this extraordinary kind of, you can't be a politician who hasn't got a flag, it seems, at the moment.
I know, yeah. Do you know, it's really interesting for me about this whole flag business because, you know, like, so the Union Jack is generally seen as slightly less problematic than the St George's Cross. I think that's fair to say, because what you tend to see is that when there's like the flying the flag thing that's going on at the moment, these people are not putting up Union Jacks. What they're putting up is the English, you know, the St George's Cross, and they're painting it on, things like that. And so you have to wonder about the motivations of that. Like, why is that happening? And also, well, I think we can tell why it's happening, but also the fact that it is associated with a lot of racism. And people who fly the St George's flag can scream to their blue in the face and say, but it's not. It's just about being patriotic. But actually, it is associated with racism, and it does frighten and intimidate people of colour in particular, you know, when they see those flags flied. So, flied? Is that a word? Anyway, blown, stuck up, painted anywhere, whatever. Right. And so I do think it's slightly problematic. I don't think we can separate the motives from the thing, if you know what I mean. It's like, you know, because in fact, I don't know if you saw Nicola Sturgeon was being interviewed, because she's just published a book about her life as a politician. Yeah. And she was asked about, because the same thing's happened in Scotland. All of a sudden there's this big surge of people flying the Scottish flag in ways that it wasn't before. And she said more or less the same sort of thing that I feel, which is that the flag itself isn't the issue, it's the motivations of the people doing it is the challenge. And so she said, I don't care about flags, but I do care about why people are flying them. And if it's generally about patriotism, that's one thing. But if it's actually racism disguised as patriotism, or xenophobia disguised as patriotism, and she doesn't think that's such a good thing.
Oh, I find that unbelievable from her.
I know. Well, she did say,
the Scottish flag and the independence referendum, and there was plenty of hatred of people with English roots living in Scotland. I mean, I was actually going to say that one of the main reasons I would feel positive about flying an England flag would be a desire to show that I am proud of my bit of the United Kingdom just as much as Scots are about their bit. I mean, I sometimes joke with a couple of my Scottish friends when they're banging on and on and on about wanting to have a referendum for Scottish independence, that perhaps we should have a referendum for English independence and stop giving them quite so much money to prop up their economy. And I'm not being racist there. I'm being proud of my roots.
Yeah, well, but that's why the point is about the motivations, Peter. But I have to say, I find it patriotism generally very weird. Like, my country is better than any other country, and on two levels. Firstly, if you'd have been born in Norway, you'd be patriotic to Norway. Yeah, you know, so it's very much an accident of birth where you are, and I'm not sure people should be forced just because you're born here to say this is the best country in the world, and because it isn't. And secondly, personally, and I expect we'll get hate mail for this, I'm not particularly proud of England. If you look at England's history, if you look at massive damage we've caused in the world, if you look at all of the major global challenges that are happening now that feel remote to us, you know, now in today's society, but actually were largely down to actions and activities that have been carried out by the English government in particular, then there's an awful lot not to be proud of in this country, including right now, you know, some of our behaviours as a nation towards asylum seekers and refugees. So, but I know that it's not fashionable to say that. It's not fashionable to say, no, I'm not particularly proud to be English. I'm certainly not proud of our heritage. What I would be proud of is current modern behaviour. That's the difference. I'm going to get so much hate mail now.
Well, I think it's become rather too fashionable to take that line that you're taking. And we've lurched. I mean, certainly the history that I learned at school was all about how, and I remember thinking as a young person, why is it that our country is responsible for so many things that are brilliant in the world? Isn't it great to be born in this country? And there was that kind of indoctrination, but I do feel at times it has gone the other way, and that people now look for, because there are some extraordinarily positive things which this country has delivered.
So have most really terrible regimes in the world done positive things, Peter. I don't think you can excuse the absolutely appalling behaviour of certain, and it's not all British people, not all English people. Of course it's not. It was the people in charge, largely, forgive me, white men at the time, very wealthy, very privileged, are the ones who did all that stuff. But you can't excuse all of that by saying,
No.
but look at that, we built railways. Oh, look at that, we invented the television, or whatever. Well, we didn't. That was Scotland, wasn't it? Anyway. But that's the point I'm making. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being truthful about our history and saying, actually, we are largely responsible for most of the shit in the world. This tiny little country, with so much of what's gone horribly wrong in international relations and all the rest of it has been down to our behaviour. And I think we ought to acknowledge that and not say, yes, but... and that's what they said about Nazi Germany, wasn't it? Yes, but he built railways. Yes, but he improved the economy, know.
I mean, I think we would be more... This is where you and I are different in our kind of style and delivery. I think we would make more progress constructively in using less extreme language than what you use there, because I do accept you have a point. And the other thing that I think is really powerful in what you said earlier was not so much the motivation of the people putting up the flags, but how it makes other people feel. So I cannot, many of us cannot announce that there is no problem with this if the truth is people from other ethnicities or whatever do feel threatened by that gesture. It's not a neutral. So when Billy Bragg says, if you've got a flagpole, raise a flag, it is a neutral act to put something up my flagpole, but it might not be seen as a neutral act by others around. And I think it's perfectly reasonable and empathetic and kind to take that into consideration.
I think you're right about that, because also it's not any flag. There are plenty of flags where if you flew those flags, they would be highly offensive to certain people. Flags are so I don't know why this has got stuck in my head, but like if you were to fly a swastika, that would not be, that's not just a flag. Yeah, trans flag is highly offensive to some people, and not to others. So I think, it's definitely not to me because I'm a trans ally, as you know, but nonetheless, I think I don't know. That's why I think these things are not necessarily straightforward. It's like, I wouldn't dream of telling anybody don't fly a flag. What I would do is exactly what you've just said. So just think about what message are you actually trying to give here. Is your message genuinely one of patriotism? And is it inclusive of all British people, whatever colour or background they are? Or is it about white exceptionalism? And if it's that, then don't do it, because that's not right.
There is something emotional, and I don't know if you'd say it was irrational or spiritual, about the association that we can have with symbols, because I do feel a pride and an emotional association with Somerset, despite only having lived here a month. There is something about putting that flag up that I would never put a flag up if I didn't have a flagpole, but I feel and it's tied up with the sporting achievement and the competition and wanting to be better than Warwickshire, flying my flag and saluting it when we've just thrashed them when they thought they were going to beat us. I feel really good about that. Doesn't make me
I think that's
racist against Warwickshire, but it's more than just it's not just my head that's in play there. There's
it's
something
your emotions,
deeper,
your heart,
and so that is all those emotions and associations are clearly swirling around for the people who are painting the roundabouts and flying the flags, as much as the people who are reading into that gesture.
I'm sure that's right. And symbols do matter, of course. We rely on symbols to be guidance. As religious symbols, for example, remind people of what they've signed up to.
Charity badges.
Charity badges, exactly. So I'm not anti-symbols per se, but I don't know, I want people to care about the impact of their actions on others. And I think that if they don't, I find that problematic. I think, it's but also that, and also this whole thing, this isn't about flags at all. This is about a whipping up of anti-asylum seeker and refugee rhetoric by certain groups of people, certainly fueled very much so by the mainstream media. There's no question about that, not helped by our current block of politicians and some of their approaches, and that, all sorts of problems that are nothing at all to do with migrants or refugees are being blamed on them. Housing, doctor's appointments, I can't get my council house. Well, they're not being given to refugees and asylum seekers, so that's not their fault. So, it's just tied up in a lot of stuff, but I've got a lot of friends of different backgrounds to pretty much every single one of them say they feel really uncomfortable and quite threatened if they walk down the street and there's a whole load of English flags, so they seriously question the motivations of the people behind them, and they feel intimidated and they feel unsafe. So I just think we need to think about these things. But it won't stop, though. People with bad-minded motives will not be influenced by what you and I say on our podcast, Peter, is the honest truth. We're more appealing to people sort of halfway to say, just think it through.
And there are some deep behaviours here. I mean, what would we do? What do we think about all the murals across the Belfast? I mean, it's really striking when you go there and people are proud of their sectarian communities, which creates as many problems as it solves. But to tell people we're going to whitewash all that lot. These things run deep.
It's something about being able to be proud of whatever the thing is, whether it's your football club or your cricket club or your county or organisation or your country, being able to be proud of that without that pride being exclusive. In other words, without pushing other people out. I mean, it's always struck me actually about the difference between football and cricket, and I was talking to my partner about it the weekend. I was saying it's really odd, isn't it, that in football you have to segregate the fans. So, they don't sit in the same bits of the stadium. They're completely separated. They're often let out at different times. But in cricket, you're just as likely to be sat, if you're at the Somerset Warwickshire game, you're just as likely to be sat next to a Warwickshire supporter. And there just doesn't seem to be that, they wear their hats, they cheer, all the rest of it. There doesn't seem to be that same sort of tension. And I think that's what I would aspire to, as a nation, is about. You can sit alongside others who, are your enemies on the pitch, but who actually you see as human beings and sharing a love of whatever it is.
Funnily enough, they're still my football team, Absolute United, even though they're across the other side of the country. But the division they were in last year, you had to have segregation, so they were successful in that. And we were all used to wandering around the ground and standing anywhere except when Absolute plays Maidstone, and then there's a lot of hatred on both sides and quite a sort of history, and you have to keep the fans apart. But now they've been relegated. There's no requirement for segregation unless the police argue, which they would do for the game against Maidstone. But some of the supporters have expressed discomfort at the opposition fans coming and standing alongside them and cheering in the way that you have described, which is completely normal in other sports. And they've actually
in cricket and rugby.
I actually think it is interesting. The club has asked the fans whether we would like to have segregation or not have segregation as and it's a sort of customer service thing now, and I think it'll be quite close. And I think it's a pity, but if it's spoiling people's enjoyment of the game because they feel threatened by or upset by,
but it's kind of victim blaming in a way, isn't it? It's like, why on earth should we have to segregate football fans at matches? I mean, I know why, because violence, because awful things happen. But why? Why is that stuff happening at football? And it's definitely not happening in cricket or in rugby or in many other teams. It doesn't happen in hockey, as far as I'm aware. It doesn't happen in basketball. Why on earth is it so vitriolic and so dangerous in football? I don't understand it. Although this is turning into a podcast about sports. But that's
well, it isn't really.
That's a risk you take. That's a risk you take, listeners.
Well, let's talk about another charity-related thing, because we'd mentioned trying to understand the motives of people flying flags. But Prince Harry's just made a big donation to children in need, hasn't he?
He has, £1 million.
And I think some people have been questioning his motivation.
I know it's. I mean, the hatred for Prince Harry and the nation, I find baffling personally. But anyway,
segregating our princes.
Yes, but it is actually interesting because he's been really had a rough time in the media. Like they're saying it's a charm offensive. He's manipulating. He wants to manipulate public opinion and stuff like that. That's the only reason he did it. And I'm like, oh my goodness, these people commenting on that have absolutely no idea about much of the motivations of many of the major philanthropists across the world, certainly in the UK. You know, I mean, for goodness sake, we have people who donate to universities and have wings named after them, or libraries named after them, you know, or who have statues built for them, or, you know, wards in hospitals are called, you know, the Peter Wanless ward or what have you. And for me personally, I honestly don't think the motive matters. I really don't. Speaking purely from a charity point, I mean, DSC, we never get donations. We have, well, that's not true. We have a couple who have been good friends to DSC for absolute decades. And they always give us a small donation every year. But that's incredibly unusual for charities of our type. You know, we have to earn our money, basically. We don't get given it. I wouldn't care. If somebody just came, if Prince Harry came and gave me £1 million, I'd be like, that's fine, don't care what your motives are. By all means, go off and have as many photos you've taken. I'm happy to stand beside you holding the check. And I think that's something that's very true to lots of us in charities. It's like, you know what, we need the money so much that we don't really care about the motivation. But anyway, I don't know. What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, that's my instinct as well, that it's not for us to determine where people choose to spend their money. And I'd rather Prince Harry gave £1 million to children in need than buy Meghan's marmalade or whatever.
Yeah.
Having said that, the Children's Society recently turned down a donation from the outgoing Archbishop of Canterbury, and we had some extremely lively discussions at the NSPCC board about whether to accept legacy gifts from previously convicted paedophiles.
Can we just clarify? Justin Welby was not a previously convicted paedophile. So just for the listeners, just in case, Peter is not making that link.
Sorry.
He's not making that link. He's talking about donations to children's charities. Yeah, just to clarify that.
But there was a theme about his what he may or may not have done, and trying to judge someone's motivation about whether they are offering a gift because of something which they regret or have rightly or wrongly been associated with. And that is the obligation and the responsibility ultimately of trustees to decide, do we accept money? And the Charity Commission is quite strong on you've got to have an extremely good reason to turn money down. And there was quite a fuss, wasn't there, at the time of the President's Club, that organization that had rather kind of misogynistic events where lots of men went and groped the waitresses and money was raised, and I think Great Ormond Street gave some money back as a consequence of that, but not many others did, and we didn't, because the money was long gone and
of course, and spent it.
So there's scope for judgment, but fundamentally, the charity sector depends on taking money and not judging, asking too many questions.
Well, this is why I think the Charity Commission's got it actually right, very right, because they're so clear. You know, you have to have a really good reason to turn down money, and that reason it can't be just because the trustees don't particularly like the individual or people have worries about the background. Taking the money has to damage your reputation significantly. It has to cause ramifications to the charity. And you can't just turn it down because you have a moral, like, rolling in your tummy of not feeling happy about it. And so I think that's actually helpful to us as charities, because there are times when you do feel I've sat on boards of charities where we've had donations where it's been like, it felt very uneasy about it. But then, the law is really clear. Your unease and your discomfort as a board or as a charity is not a good enough reason to turn down a donation. It has to actively damage the charity or the cause. So I think that is actually super helpful. And ultimately, it's always that question: does the end justify the means? But like when you're helping people, when you're saving animals, when you're preventing, irreversible damage to the environment, that surely is the key factor to take into account. That's the key thing that matters. The work that the money you're given is going to deliver. I mean, I think we always have to start with the end in mind, which is the people or causes that we serve.
Absolutely. Agree. And on that note... I have presidential duties again today, though the weather forecast doesn't look great. But at least I'm going to have some good chat for the cricket people about England cricket captains of the past I was hanging around with last night.
You name dropper. You name dropper. I'd do exactly the same if it was me. All right. Thank you, listeners. And,
see you next week.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.